Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club for the month of September 2022. Welcome. We've got a really nice piece of science fiction for you. This cool book, Ghost Cage, and we are very lucky to be joined by the artist and co-writer Nick DRAGOTTA and Caleb Gaynor. There you are. Hello, guys.
What's up, Ryan? How you doing?
I'm terrific. How are you guys?
Good.
Yeah. Good. Better now that I see that big wall of books behind you.
Yeah.
Warms me heart and soul.
Well, when you signed all the book plates, you knew they had to be going somewhere, right?
Well, that was my assumption. You never know in this wacky world of ours.
Yeah. No, we're not just keeping them in the back or something. So yeah. Hey, so it's good to have you guys. Let me start this. My first question is always the same question because I love this question. Why comics? Of all the ways you could be making a living, why have you chosen comics? Which Nick, especially you're quite a veteran in this, and I think you know that comics is a really hard business. It's a really hard business sometimes. So.
It is. I ask myself that sometimes, and I think it's just an obsession to tell stories. The most enjoyable part for me is thumbnailing, and it gets really difficult when you have to finish and then publish and all of that stuff. But the most enjoyable thing is just moment to moment scenes and trying to get emotion and telling stories. And I think I was affected by film at an early age. I came up in the, Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and all these great movies, Jaws, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and as I get older, so on and so on. But storytelling, I'm obsessed with it. And I had a knack for drawing. So what else could I do,
Very good. Caleb, what do you answer that same question? Why comics? What's the appeal?
Well, just so everyone knows, I still have a day job and a ton of corporate clients. So it's a sickness for me. For Nick, it's a calling and a destiny. No, for me, I think it's really similar to Nick. I am a stronger writer than an illustrator. If you follow my Instagram, you'll probably be like, well, that's probably why Caleb works with so many artists on so many high profile books. So I leaned into writing as a kid. My earliest dream was to be like an animator. But as I got into drawing, I discovered that I was maybe pretty lazy and would rather be playing video games or something for most of my childhood. So I love comics. They're my favorite media to personally enjoy and get stories from. So I don't know, at some point, it did feel like my space, my place to do what I do best. And it's kind of where I've developed my skills. But the cool thing about comics is it's totally informed my other kind of life, working in UX design and copy for apps. And whenever I talk to a new client or get a new job, they're like, so what's with your weird resume? You got all these weird jobs and marketing and stuff. And it's I don't know, man, it's just a bunch of words and boxes and pictures and shit. Just hire me. I don't know. It's all the same. Comics is the highest level of that to me. So, one day I'm working on an app or a landing page for a brand. But the whole time I'm thinking about it the same way I would think about reading Dragon Ball Z. It's you got to make the eye go one way or the other, and you got to get people where they need to go. And in the case of comics, where you want people to go is the coolest drawing you've ever seen of something exploding. So it's comics is where my heart is forever.
Yeah, there's kind of a difference between user interface design and comics, though, right? One's the function is utilitarian, the other is to tell a story.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge oversimplification, which
Sure.
is what writers do
Yeah.
nonstop. So
Yeah, but Brian,
that's
I'd
what you
argue
get.
too. I think one of Caleb's strength is the brevity in which he can write. Like, not to get too into the weeds, but we would do stuff. I'd be like, "I have this dialogue. I want them to emote this, Caleb," and he would always go, "All right, well, I can get a sentence in," and he would nail it. You know, so I think like what he does on his day job, doing ad copy and whatnot, he just really can get to the crux of it. But Caleb brings up such an interesting point too. Like, comics really do prepare you for so many other jobs. I mean, when I was in San Francisco, I was before East to West, and I was making 30 to 40 grand a year working at Marvel full time, and I had a baby, and I'm like, I can't support a child on this. I was doing concept art for an engineering firm, like just doing drawings that were like I could do in my sleep. It was so easy, and they were paying me like 80 grand a year in healthcare,
Right.
and then I'd go home at night and I'd go do East to West.
Yeah.
But like all those years really prepped me to draw quickly, convey ideas succinctly and simply. And these like tech companies could really use that. They were like, wow, we just need a picture. We want to tell a story of this idea. And it was really cool. And then it helped inform my own work, So yeah, just comics will prepare. I do everything from storyboards to concept art. So it just, it's a killer job. It's so much fun. It's so much work though. And it is very difficult to make a living. We'll get into this probably, but I didn't have success till I was 36.
Right.
I toiled for a long time. It was tough.
Right. Yeah. I mean, let's put a pin in the money conversation for a few
and it
minutes.
always goes there with me. I'm sorry.
I would love to have that conversation though, because I mean, you're in a very unique position that that you've worked all sides of this. So, but let's just sort of talk about background a little more. Nick, did you go to school for art? Did you study? Was it fine art that you were looking at, or was it comics particularly?
Probably the biggest mistake of my life, not studying fine art. It's easy to like Monday morning quarterback, but I went to Savannah College of Art and Design and studied their department, sequential art. And at the time, it was really new. So it was mostly grad students running the department, no working professionals, except for one, Mark Neese, who was a writer, but no artists. So now the program's really great. It's really come a long way. I was in there in its infancy. And I mean, we would eat pizza and talk about comics, but no one was really teaching. And but luckily, it was a great school in that it did have a fine arts department. It did have a good graphic design department, a really good illustration department. So you could get your life drawing. But like, not to knock the teachers too much, they did introduce me to comics I was not introduced to. This was the mid 90s, late 90s. So it was all the Image folks and everyone going back to Marvel after the Image boom. Comics were kind of at a low point. But the teachers introduced me to artists like Alex Toth that kind of set me on a different direction in my career. And like some manga that I wasn't introduced to where I grew up. So art school, and I traveled. I went to Italy for a little bit, in France. I got to study over there. The big thing too, it taught me the computer. So
did comics seem like a viable?
No,
career?
Dude, I remember when I graduated, I turned to my dad. I got my degree and I was like, Dad, I don't know what I just did. Like, I mean, comics, like Marvel was bankrupt. It was 90. I graduated in 98. I think they were bankrupt then. Yeah. It was a dark scene and not a lot of jobs. Like the big jobs were in Magic the Gathering cards, or a lot of students were going to draw like for Penthouse Comics, and I was just like, I just remember like being like, Dad, I got this degree and I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Luckily, I went to school with a guy named Lee Lowridge, who was a big colorist at the time. He started a studio, and it was the advent of computer coloring. And he was one of the first on that. He started a studio, and like I had just enough Photoshop skills that he hired me. And we like got a lot of DC books, and I made like a really nice living out of school. Back then, Brian, rent was $200 a month.
Sure.
It was super easy to live. You could make $20,000 a year in Savannah, Georgia, and live like a king. So it was lucky. But I always planted my ass in the chair. I'm going to draw. Didn't get my first job till I was 28. And I graduated 2022. So it takes a long time, and I was nowhere near ready. Now, don't get me wrong. You've got kids that come out that are super talented and are ready to go in their teens and early 20s. I was one of those. I was a late bloomer. It took me a while.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to me, the big challenge of programs like SCAT, et cetera, today are that, like, we're expecting 22-year-olds to do 200-page graphic novels as the very first thing they do out the gate, right? Like that's how they're being recruited by Scholastic or whoever who want like a whole book from them. And I don't know. When I was 22, I sure didn't have the life experience to be able to do that.
Dude, my first job was Marvel at 28 through SCAT. Again, they had Editors Day. They'd fly professional editors in to look at portfolios. I was 28, graduated at 22. So I was like, one day I'll get there. I kept my portfolio, kept working on it. I knew they were coming, knew the teachers. They said, sure, Nick, come in, show your stuff. I had been out of school for 6 years. Axel Alonso came down. He's like, good news, bad news. Good news is I want to be the first editor to give you work. I'm going to do that. Bad news is the book I was going to give you just got canceled. So he's like, let's stay in touch. It was Spider-Man Tangled Web. He's going to give me an issue of that. And then it got canned.
That's funny.
Yeah, and then he was like, just stay in touch. And so we did. And Mike Allred and Peter Milligan did Ecstatics, and they did the Princess Di issue. Yeah. And then Mike had to redraw the whole thing, and it like killed him because it was apparently a really good book, but they killed it at the last minute. And Mike was like, I need a break. And I happened to email Axel that day, and he was like, hey, I need fill-ins on Ecstatics. And I was like, done. But dude, my issue of Ecstatics was so bad. I didn't get a call back for like another year. So it's just like, it's what you're saying. Like you get thrown into the big leagues and you're like, holy shit, is this hard? And I wasn't prepared because I worked on a portfolio for like years, and yeah, it was good. But then when you have a month to draw an issue, it's a whole different story.
Right. So. It's a whole different story. That's a completely different thing, man. Caleb, how about you? Like educationally, did you study writing? Did you study comics? Did you do anything like that? Straight to design school? I don't know.
I got a journalism degree.
Oh, nice.
But I went to like the advertising route, and my goal back then was to be in a metalcore band that would go on tour and like open for Killswitch Engage or something. Like I didn't want a real job. I just wanted to have fun and be stupid. And but I had to pay my way through college, so I like took it just seriously enough to like not waste money. So like I had a lot of A's and a lot of C's. It was like kind of like, you want me to take like the history of science? Like I don't give a shit. Like like whatever. But all my writing classes, I had really good professors, and at the time I didn't really think I would write fiction. It seemed too daunting. I drew like a comic strip for my college paper for 2 years at the University of Kansas. And like I'd always been doing comic strips, but I was like, I just want to draw, and it should be like a magic trick. And I don't want to do like, under drawings and anatomy. And like, I was just really lazy about it. But I knew I could write about stuff. And so not too long after college, maybe about a year, I'd been freelancing for like alt weeklies in the Kansas City area, like the Village Voice publication called The Pitch. And I was writing about music, and I was still playing some music, and I was like printing t-shirts, and the economy collapsed. This was like 2008. So I was broke, but like it was okay because I was in a college town and I was getting lots of internet writing gigs. But then everything changed. Like Iron Man came out. All these like big media companies wanted like experts, nerds, professional nerds. And like the concept's laughable now with everything like Twitch and like all these YouTube kids that are just like making this high quality like content like in 5 minutes, and they know everything. Wikipedia helps too, but I was using it, in 2008 to write to pad some articles about very tiny like movie option news for MTV. And along the way, I met a lot of people at Wizard. I got to write for Wizard magazine for a couple of years before it said farewell. I had an article in Toy Fair for its final issue that was just a PDF. So that was another dream deferred. And then I got a blogging gig for like 5 years for a website called Comics Alliance. And over time, I was like an editor there. I worked with a bunch of bloggers. I covered news. And along the way, I met everyone. So I was at every convention. You get to interview like Dan DiDio and Jim Lee and everybody at Marvel and tons of creators. And so I did that for a while. And that's kind of what sparked the interest in writing for real. I started drawing my own books in my mid-20s, probably 26, 27. And by 28, I had worked with some other creator friends of mine to self-publish a bunch of stuff. And I was like, oh, I can do this. This is fine. And that's when I started getting work for hire on books like the Animated Turtles book and some other things. So school just prepared me to like meet deadlines and work hard and make decisions very quickly. That's like the best thing about a journalism degree, at least for me. And it helps you become a efficient writer, the style at the time, like when I was coming up was, and it's still kind of the style, depending on who's writing, a lot of dialogue, very dialogue heavy. And, some people are great at that, and their books are good for it. And a lot of people love it. But I just I have a different mindset, and I just kind of want everything to hit like a song lyric, like some Swedish guy in a metal band is like screaming like 5 words, so that combined with like manga where everybody's just kind of yelling moves at each other all the time help me like shrink things down. And I just talked way too much. I went to college and I got a journalism degree. That's my answer.
I didn't want to interrupt you. You're going on some good rolls there. I love the fact that you kind of halfway fell backwards into this.
Yeah. Well, I knew deep down, like it's something, I think a lot of people do this with a lot of their, I call them dreams or, their artistic pursuits. Real life is hard and it sucks, and you got to make money, and you are your own best advocate a lot of times. Like everybody in my life is really supportive of everything I wanted to do, my parents and my wife and my friends, but you can kind of like, you think you want to be on one path, but like deep down, the way that you really want to go and the way you should go and the way that you'll probably like have the most success. And once I just committed to comics, everything happened very quickly. Like within a year or two, I was getting professional work, having like a network and kind of knowing the roads and the methods from being a journalist and just being a part of the comic community that way for so long. Mm-hmm. That helped, but like there's no line skipping. Like you got to know what the hell you're doing and you got to be good. So, I was lucky.
Do you think it was easier because you at least knew editors, like had a working relationship with them as from being a journalist?
Kind of like, the first editor I worked with was, Bobby Kurnow. He was at IDW and he was doing the Turtles books, and I had done some press for like the launch of the IDW Turtles book. Like interviewed Kevin Eastman and Bobby and a bunch of the artists. And so he was somebody I knew, but the thing that got me the work was I did this fan comic with my buddy Buster Moody, and we put it on Tumblr, and it was just like wacky turtle stuff, right? Like the turtles are having, or the Foot Clan is having like a backyard barbecue pool party. And the turtles like are just like driving down the street in the turtle van, and they're like, what's going on with the Foot Clan over here? Because like the Technodrome's in this backyard of like a suburban house, it's like wacky nonsense. And the turtles just go in and beat the hell out of everybody. and that's the comic. And then like they ruin this barbecue, and like that's the gag, and they leave. And the turtles are they're not really the bad guys because the Foot Clan is evil, but that like went a little bit viral on Tumblr. Like Kevin Eastman saw it and he like said something nice to Buster about it at a convention. And so like I put something out there that was like, I can do this at least. Yeah. And he's like, Bobby's exact words. I talked to him at like San Diego, whatever year it was, many years ago, the 2012, 2013 maybe. Because the new Nickelodeon show had come out at the time, the CGI one. And I talked to Bobby, and I was doing that thing where I hadn't been a journalist for long enough where I felt comfortable asking editors about work and stuff. And so I was like, hey, you know, how's editing? How you been? Yada, yada. You're looking for like your little like segue where you can be like, I'm a writer. You want to hire me? And we talked, and like, it sort of didn't come up, but he was about to walk away, and he like has this like, oh, hey, I got this animated book. Nobody likes working on it because, you know, the brand people are like so heavy handed and have too many notes. Email me after the show sometime. It's like, it's sort of like, you know, Nick with like coming in, he's got a book and it gets canceled. I had like just this opposite thing where like there was a book no one else wanted to do as a writer because there are too many Nickelodeon notes about like, you know, you can't have the turtles use a pizza without an adult around, like, you know, stuff like that. And then I was like, okay, like, can they cook a pizza over 2 flaming trash barrels with their katana? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. And I'm like, sweet, you know, but it was like you're writing these 8-page stories. I was writing backups at first, and yeah, like a lot of professional comic book writers, like for the rate, you know, because it was a lot of work to hit all those notes. Like you'd come up with a cool story, editor would approve it, you'd write it. But yeah, it was a really good, I'll call it like a proving ground. And I did that first 8-pager. It felt great. Like I even thumbnailed it all myself. Like just like, oh, I'm a professional comic book writer now. And I'm doing it. And yeah, like once I did that, I felt like it was totally divorced from what I had done as a journalist. But the skill of just knowing how to talk to people in the industry, that's definitely how I got my foot in the door. Like you kind of know like what kind of personalities you're dealing with, the sensibilities of a lot of people.
Sure.
Creative types, you know, a lot of anxious people in comics and stuff. So like, and things like that. And so you learn how to talk to people, be approachable, and be approached, and even just tabling. Like if you're tabling and you're a newer creator, that'll really teach you how to just talk to strangers for 10 hours a day. So yeah, I forget what the question was, but I did. Now I'm making comments.
Oh, good. You answered it and more. So let's maybe talk a little bit about the origins of Ghost Cage. Where did this come from? Where did it start? Did it start with you, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, we had a mutual friend named David Brothers, and Caleb had just moved to the Bay Area. Me and David were living over in the East Bay, and he, you know, just said, hey, you two should hang out. I think you'd get along. And so I was about maybe late 30 issues in on East to West, and I was definitely like, what's going to be next? And not bored of it, but I was just kind of like, it was on cruise control. You know, me and John were just cooking. I could see the end in sight. And I was like, what am I going to do next? And so David had introduced us, and Caleb came over, and we hung out for a bit. And they kind of just turned into bitch sessions about the Bay Area or comics or toys. And one thing at the time was, you know, I had 2 young kids living in East Bay, and we wanted to own a home. And you know, real estate in the Bay Area is just ridiculous. It's not affordable at all. I mean, or if you want to afford it, you're going to be mortgage poor, like if you can afford it. So it was just, we started saying, let's do a comic about like the rents or something. And we just started, but I wanted to draw some dark sci-fi. I was on my Nihei kick. He's a Japanese manga artist, writer that does Biomega, Knights of Sidonia, Blam. I mean, incredible comics, expansive world building, beautiful design, heavy blacks, just awesome. If you haven't read any Nihei, definitely go out and get some Nihei. And I was like, Caleb, this is what I want to do. Like, basically a fight comic with some dark sci-fi. And we were bitching about rents and housing prices. And we were like, well, what if there are these landowners or towers, they own towers, and they're going to fight for each other's towers, and then you accumulate enough, you own the city or something. And it's going to be like a fight comic, like as a la the Raid. But and then we just started kicking around boss ideas, and then I think like Caleb was in on elemental stuff, and then we were like, well, this seems divorced, the elements of the bosses and these real estate towers. And so then it was like, well, how about let's make it energy? Is that, Caleb, am I right? I mean, is that kind of what happened? And then I was like, go off and write it. And then Caleb, I'm not kidding.
I wrote
like the whole
novel.
thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think I ever read it fully, but I got like a lot of way through it. And I was like, oh my God, what did I do? What did I do? Like, I felt bad because I was like, holy shit. I like Ted, go write this. And he wrote it.
I think I wrote
and
it
I still like
10 or 3 days or something. I was like, oh
yeah,
shit, I got Nick wanting to work with me. Better write
and I was
it
just
before
like,
he says no.
Oh my God. I told this guy I was going to draw his book, and actually, like, I do that a lot, Brian. I'm like, let's work together. Let's do it. And you go write something. And 9 times out of 10, no one writes anything. Like, Caleb, he turned it around like a full 5-issue arc, and I was like, holy shit. Okay. And then I read it, and then we just went at it, and I was like, I don't want to work like this though. I'm gonna draw it, and then we're gonna go back in and script it. So that's kind of how it was birthed, I think.
That's interesting. So Caleb, you generated what, a full script for 6-5 issues, something like that?
Yeah, I wrote it. I mean, we tried it a few different minor ways. But yeah, basically I wrote like a graphic novel. And I was like,
but we didn't use that though.
No, we didn't use it.
So yeah, I forgot. I actually drew. So after that initial meeting, I drew 15 pages.
Yeah.
So we had talked.
We talked through like the opening scene.
Yeah, basically the 15 pages that are in the book. Because we established a tower and all that. It was a little different. And then I drew like the first 15, and then Caleb went and wrote off of that, because like we had kind of all the character designs in there. But then we ended up not using that initial thing he did. It was like too much.
I'm gonna change all the names, and you'll see a new comic come out in like 2 years once I can get somebody else to draw it. Because like just sand off a few things, and it's like, no, I'm just kidding. That script will probably never see the light of day, but no, I was really motivated, like from the get-go, like the work for hire stuff, and like the licensed comic kind of world was sort of like dwindling. So I was just like dying to work on something. I was dying to do an image book. And so, yeah, like it came really easy, because like Nick and I would hang out. I'd have some crazy ideas. He'd have some crazy ideas. I'd write down a bunch of notes, and we kind of knew like the basic cast. Like we had like Karloff in the book, like he was always pretty much there. We knew we would have Sam, and we knew Karloff would probably have like another character attached to him. And I think Ghost Bud was already there. And like the character that ended up becoming Doyle was like sort of there, but pretty much, yeah, I handed it to Nick, and he was like, I want to do this though. I was like, cool. We'll write it that way. So I would basically like write scripts for the issues with like minimal instruction. Any instruction or like scene details or whatever, they were for me, just so I knew where I was in the script. And Nick would draw, like he would work his sorcery. I get pages back, and we go through, and we do the dialogue again to make sure it was just like perfect on the page. David Brothers, our editor, our mutual friend who introduced us, he would do a pass and like tell us if we were on the right path. And then we do like one more pass pretty much. And 3 issues later, there's a trade. There's a bunch of trades behind you.
Yeah. That's cool. Those 15 pages, Nick, that you drew originally, are they in here? Do they get redrawn, or
they got redrawn? There's a bunch of iterations. Like it's interesting because when I first did it, I was like, this looks like East to West, and I didn't want to come out and have a book look like East to West. And
sure.
I say that because eventually the deadline hits and you're just running on your instincts, and you are who you are. But I don't know, like I don't know if you noticed, but there was like a deadline, looser style in those first few pages, and I was trying to be a little cartoonier. So I went back and redrew it all with that in mind, like just loosen up and try and really flow with the storytelling. But then we put a lot more exposition in too, because yes, Kayla and I would outline this. I would then go draw it, and I could draw it totally different than we outlined. And then I'd cause a lot of problems. And then me and Caleb and David would sit down and problem solve it. But we kind of knew the ending, but getting there was a lot of like this. And then problem solving right on deadline. It was like exhilarating. It was fun. I mean, I don't know, Caleb, wouldn't you say we were like creating this comic, like we were figuring out the story as we went?
Yeah. I mean, like it was sort of like I've had friends, of course, who've worked Marvel style in different ways. And that was one thing that like it was important to Nick as the co-writer and the artist, of course, to like just make it look awesome, let the visuals like tell the story like in the most impactful way possible. And like as a can I cuss on this thing?
You may.
Okay, cool.
You fucking may, buddy.
I'm a shitty artist,
yeah.
but like I know enough. I'm like, like Nick's over here in the UFC, and I'm like that guy who just goes to jiu-jitsu all the time and gets beat up. But like, so I know enough to know that I'm not like, UFC or whatever. But yeah, like that's something with all of my collaborators. Yes, please be the co-storyteller in like the way that makes you happy enough to draw these fucking pages. Cause like it's hard. It's hard as hell. It's a ton of work. And there was never a time like Nick would call me and like once in a while I'd give him shit. Be like, but I never like had an issue with anything that he wanted that turned out maybe a little different or even a lot different than what was in the outline, because it was like, well, we got to write this dialogue either way and clean it up and make it better as good as we can either way. So like these pages are fire. So let's do it. I would give him shit about one or two things, but mostly just to irritate him. It was never, never like, no, let's redraw 3 pages. Let's put top hats on everyone. I don't know about this. Like,
it seems like it's potentially though a chaotic way to make the final product. Yeah. And so I guess my question then is, was there any point where you needed to redraw things, because you got to page 70 or whatever, and you're like, oh shit. No, not at all. Okay.
No, we just we didn't look back. I think like you got to just trust your instincts, and we knew our ending. We knew where we were going, and then I think what we're talking about was the challenges of making it interesting in Act 2. Where you got to like kind of tell a little backstory. Who are these people? Really show their personality, but at the same time wanting to draw a fight comic. And then what's interesting too, like, I mean, Brian, if you flip through that book, it's 10 to 12 panel pages every page.
Sure.
And the goal was not to make it read densely. Like me and Caleb set out and said, this is going to have a rhythm and a flow, and we want readers to crank through it, so we did 44-page issues, knowing that they'll probably take as long as a 20, but you're going to feel just as full, just as satisfied. Yeah. But like, that's the comics I like. I mostly read manga. I like that I cruise through it and I get some good emotional beats. And we just challenged ourselves to do that each issue, have a cliffhanger, each page maybe even have a cliffhanger to turn into the next page, to make sure you get to the end of the issue and want the next issue. I mean, that's it. You know, like that's kind of the juice of it. And you do this long enough that you feel comfortable doing it. But you're right. I mean, there were definitely days when the first script would come back and Russ would letter it, and me and Caleb would be like, "Oh my God, this can't go to print. Like, what did we do?" And we'd be like, "David, what do you think here?" And like, we'd all just get back in, and we had a Google Doc going, all of us commenting, rewriting, and it was awesome. Like, that's where the editing, you know, it's all about good design. So like, and I mean design like across the board, and editing and taste, and not having an ego, knowing like, yeah, let's take that line out. We don't need it. And you say redraw every now and then. Yeah, I might have redone a panel or flipped a scene.
Sure.
And that makes
but not wholesale
difference.
Pages. Not
no way. I mean, we're moving ahead, dude. Right? Yeah. But you're right. We didn't dig that hole though. It wasn't that bad. But it was like an exhilarating thing. I mean, there were some sleepless nights on my end, like just being like, holy shit, what? I don't know what this is. And it's going to print this week, you know, and then we'd problem solve it. And it's funny, you tweak some dialogue and then all of a sudden it works, you know, and that was it.
So there was a point though where you weren't sure if it was actually going to be able to make it depressed the way that it was.
Yeah, I mean, it was always going to go to print. Would we be embarrassed of what it was? You know, I think that was where, or would it make sense? And I mean, that was whole another thing too. I feel like I'm a storyteller that maybe gives you too much. And I remember me and Caleb discussing this. We were like, I want to be arbitrary. Like, I want to show some imagery that makes a reader go, what is this? So that's why we put the eyeball in the guts in the beginning, to be like, why is he showing me this? It's gross. I wanted things to be unsettling, and then go back into a more sequential, like establishing shot, close up, you know, the typical storytelling you see. But then get arbitrary with it and get surreal and throw readers off their feet. Like, I know my strength as a storyteller, but can I push myself more? And that was always kind of the challenge. And then that was the big question. Will it work? You know, will that work?
Let me ask you a question that I don't know the answer to because I've never seen one of his scripts, but looking at his work, I would assume that Hickman's pretty formal about and pretty deliberate about the way that he writes, and that everything is very structured. Is that a right assumption?
No, we worked Marvel style. John would give me like a 1-page, couple paragraphs per issue, like a whole issue.
Okay.
And he would go, Nick, Death and Archibald argue, and Death wins this fight. And then he walks out the door, and he would maybe give me a line and say, just, you know, this is the ad. I knew the characters. Me and John were like on cruise control. Like, we were reading each other's minds. I could throw curveballs at John, and he would make it even. Everything I sent him, he made better. But I had no dialogue. I just knew point A to point B, and I could play any which way I wanted. I mean, it's like Ghost Cage. I'm getting to draw what I want. I'm getting to dictate the flow of the story. And I do think like our book has a certain rhythm. I think East to West, a few issues really have a really nice rhythm. And most of it's good rhythm, good storytelling. I think it reads a little quicker than, you know, a typical book of Marvel DC where there's tons of words on the page. Right. So that's the kind of comics I like to make. And John let me play and do my thing, and then he came back in and scripted it. But he always gave me the direction. He always gave me a document that outlined a specific issue, how many scenes. But I dictated the page count for each scene, all that. And it was great training. I felt ready to go right, because he really trained me up into, you know, giving me that much responsibility, trusting me that much was awesome. But I was ready for it, you know. So
nice. The other thing that both of you guys have mentioned is just how kind of integral the David was to this process. Is this something that you are used to from editors, or I mean, it's that. Oh, I mean,
It's
the reason I ask
interesting.
is it sounds like he's done more than I hear from a lot of people.
Well, I never work with an editor as a writer, right? So normally, say a Marvel correction is like Hulk's hand is too big, and I'm like,
Right.
I want to draw his hands big, you know, like you're just like, let me get away with this. I'm sure with a writer conversation is different. So maybe like, and I think David's an excellent writer and an excellent problem solver. And it was the first time, like, just really breaking story for me, like with Caleb and David. And you've got these, Caleb's and whatever he says, he's B-League UFC, whatever. He's top of the league. The guy is an incredible problem solver. I would draw scenes and go, Caleb, they got to talk like this. They got to have this mood. Next day, I'd have the script. David would then read it. And then all three of us would start laying it in over the pages and just picking it apart. But like, that's a real talent to take what's in my head and then translate it, especially when we're trying to go for minimal dialogue and succinct to the point writing. And Caleb can take these big ideas and use big words. He has incredible vocabulary that I do not have. And
he's got a thesaurus. That's all I got.
Gets right to the point. And I think the dialogue in it's great. And I think there's some good emotional beats in it. And, you know, Caleb really helped bring that home. And then you bring a David Brothers in on top of it to like look at it and go, you know what? Cut this word out here. And you're just like, what the God, that makes such a difference. Like,
yeah, David,
you know, you want this joke to be funny? Don't add this extra sentence at the end. And you're just like, oh, wow, you're right. It really hits a beat now. You know, it's just like, it's just working with people you trust. And like East to West, everyone on the team elevated it. You know, Frank Martin was my inker. He's a colorist, but that color in East to West is amazing. And Frank elevated those black and white pages. Russ Wooten comes in, does the trade dress on Ghost Cage. And I'm just like, holy shit, Russ, this thing looks different. Russ's lettering, you know, I mean, everyone, David on top of Caleb, on top of me, like everyone helped each other out, get to a next level. And that's like a good comic team. If you don't have your people watching this that want to make comics, if you've got like a squeaky wheel or someone that's not holding you're doing yourself a disservice, you know?
Yeah. I asked because, you know, the most common thing I hear is that the editors are essentially just traffic managers or are, you know, they're not as involved in the minutia, you know? I hear from a lot of people who, you know, I did all of my thumbnails and then, you know, all 200 pages of the thumbnails and they made 7 changes in that, you know, like as opposed to what you're describing sounds like an actual editor actually editing the work. Yeah,
no, I mean, he just helped the momentum. So that's what I want. I'm pretty sure I understand visual storytelling better than an editor, right? You know, maybe not the greats, Axel Alonso, Archie Goodwin, like the guys that have worked with all the great, you know, people with real history, sure. And I definitely make mistakes that editors will catch and help fix. But in terms of writing and breaking down story and crafting a better comic, I mean, I can't think of a better person than David Brothers. You know, he's awesome. But like, again, this is my experience of finally coming and speaking to an editor as a writer, right? So normally it's more nitpicky, like, hey, that guy's arm is holding the gun in the right hand, and then the other panel, it's got it in the left. And you're like, oops, oh yeah, let me fix that. So, you know.
So let me ask you, Caleb, as the writer, does that jibe with your experience as a writer, as how editors work, or is it more kind of on the side that I was talking about, where a lot of editors are just traffic managers and are?
Well, I've been really fortunate, like getting started early in my career with licensed books. I either, you know, I got to pitch what I wanted to pitch, and they would pick something, and I would turn something in, and they would make sure they would have like the big discussion at the pitch level, like, you know, the broad story beats, and they would give me thematic stuff, and they would if I was working with a licensor on stuff like Sonic the Hedgehog or Turtles or Power Rangers, I had like clear boundaries and lanes, and it was all super helpful and good. So like at the writing phase, like they paved the way, you know, and then I got to be the traffic. So they didn't have to. And then, you know, if you had corrections or if something was weird with the art, I always had really good editors on all my licensed projects. And I still do, like if I do licensed stuff. Like I've done a ton of stuff at IDW. Everybody there has been excellent. The books I've been working on, pitching now, same sort of situation. The editors are involved at like the pitch level, the outline level. Like they really care, they really give a shit. They want your book to be cool, they want to sell, and they're like invested. But and you know, like, and then David, of course, like in addition to all the work that Nick described, he was our tastemaker because he understood all the stuff that inspired us. You know, like all the same movies, video games, manga, anime, toys. Like if you were too close to something, he'd tell you. If you weren't close enough, he would tell you. And you just really want somebody in your corner when you're making a book. And sometimes the editor can be this. In the best case scenario, your editor tells you if the book is any fucking good. And like that's super validating because you're like, well, if this book doesn't sell because of whatever circumstance, like the economy or like the trends change or like fuck whatever, like it takes a while to make a comic. At least I know it was good when we made it. You know, like
yeah, but like, if David never
book.
says like this is great, he'll just be like it's fine. You know,
well, that's his way. You know, like.
But Brian,
I know it's good.
To your point, though, I've never known an editor that just traffics stuff. Like thinking back on it now, I mean, my first editor was Axel. He gave me like invaluable advice on how to draw a page when I really needed it as a youngster. Then Warren Simons was a great editor I had for a while at Marvel. Andy Corey, like, hand plucked me, was like, I know you're drawing East to West, but you have to be a part of this Batman black and white. And he was so right. Like, it made me do this cool Batmech thing. And it's like good. Yeah. Like, I mean, they all have a good definitive point of view. And I think what was nice is that they wanted to work with us. You know what I'm saying? So like, I never felt like I never felt an editor just trafficking stuff, but luckily, I mean, cause that would kind of suck. I like the idea of someone that's helping, like we said, help with that momentum. But
yeah. Great. Well, it sounds like a good set of experiences. That's
yeah, it was a blast. I mean, we had a blast making this book.
Just so you know, we've heard the same shit too. So I mean, it happens. I mean, it can, and it probably does happen. But yeah, my experiences have been, I don't have any editors I've ever complained about at BarCon. I'm like happy to see them, you know. It's all good. It's all good in my world so far.
Yeah, I love that. No, I love to hear that. That's really good, especially on a creator-owned book where you're able to, again, put together that team where you guys are all working together in sync and everybody's on the same page and you're all about making the page better. That's what you want. Was there any challenge for you, Nick? I expect the answer is no, but in doing a book in black and white rather than in color?
No,
like, did you have to adjust thinking or?
I really wanted to do an issue in black and white. I've been doing a lot of commissions with Zipatone. And then again, I read a lot of manga and I'm always fascinated by how much depth they can get on the page with so little. So I really wanted to kind of study that and bring that into my work. And I thought it would just be a nice, Frank killed it so much on East to West. Like I could never, I didn't want to follow up with like less. So I almost was like, well, let's go starker and just do a black and white comic. And I like the immediacy of how black and white reads. Like you don't really linger on a page as much because you don't have that added effect of color. So I like the immediacy of black and white and wanted to just really get in and tell a entertaining story.
Yeah, but did it change any of your storytelling decisions, I guess is the question that I'm asking, or the way that you told the story, if you see what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think maybe if anything, it just helps you pare it down, and you work more with like when I'm thumbing, if we're going to storytelling decisions, like I might build with more shapes and things like that rather than line. And then you kind of go, wow, that's really effective. I'm going to keep that shape. Whereas before I would have drawn the shape and then started drawing lines over top of it, and then you kind of have a line drawing. Whereas this, I was more thinking about silhouette and just big heavy blacks over the page. So, but like that's more of like, I guess, an instinctual thing. But yeah, I think it helped inform the story in that, like, there's just a starkness to black and white, and how much can you like put down and just do a flat black rather than rendering it out or something like that.
Yeah.
And like, I think that reads more immediately. So
yeah, no, I think so too. I really admire the cartooning that's going on here.
Thank
too.
you.
I think it's very cartoony, but it's also hyper detailed. It's weird. Like at a glance, it almost reminds me of Dave Sim and Gerhardt on Cerebus. With the cartoony foreground, but the really hyper detailed backgrounds.
Yeah, I mean that's just looking at comics I like. The more cartoonier figures on top of realistic backgrounds, and that's kind of expedient. So some of the stuff I would pull in a photo, and then I would turn up the contrast of it on the computer and then look at it in black and white and draw it, or bring it into the drawing and then just mess with it. So it's just really, that's like almost expediency, but you're right. It's an effective technique. It really draws you into the world, and then the characters get to be lively and poppy and alive on the page. So.
Yeah. And the way the glasses change shape depending on emotion, is such a cartoony thing. It wouldn't work in any other kind of way of doing it,
Caleb made a funny crack on that. He was like, wow, you've turned her glasses into Spider-Man eyes all of a sudden. Because I was being consistent with it, and then all of a sudden they just start taking their own shape and stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of comics, right? You can do things like that.
It's better this way. Like if it ever got a live action adaptation, I don't know, you need like CGI glasses, doing stuff all the time, and that's what I'm banking on.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever seen like a CGI animation thing that mimicked that sort of squash and stretch of animation in a live action thing. I'm sure there must be an example.
They don't do it with Spider-Man's eyes.
They do it with Deadpool. They do it with Deadpool, I think.
Oh yeah,
quite a bit. But shit, maybe not. It seems like they do. Maybe I'm just projecting.
Ghost Kid should be animated.
Yeah, it should. Let's get Studio Trigger on it.
Yeah, I wish.
Yeah. How much time did you put into the thumbnails versus the actual final rendered pages?
The thumbnails are everything. That's where all the thinking is done. That's where it's most fun. That's where you're not worried about things being right. You're just telling a story, working with some vague idea of dialogue and hitting some emotional beats. And that's where the characters start to come alive on the page and move around, and you have happy accidents and timing things happen where you're like, oh wow, that looks really cool, that panel juxtaposed with that panel. And I love it. I wish I could just print all my comics in their thumbnail stage, because I think they're better, but American readers or comic readers in general don't want that. They want finished art. And maybe that's just me. Like I don't know, I feel like I lose some of the energy of the thumbs, but I love the thumbnail stage. It's the best part of making a comic book.
In the thumbnail stage, how much are you kind of consciously thinking about things like the page turn and the eye flow versus it's just intuitive you as a comic artist because you've done enough 100 pages to make it work?
Yeah, the page turn, definitely. So like I do all my layouts in Clip Paint Studio. It's an awesome program. It's like Photoshop, but it's made specifically for comics. And it's got this awesome tool with a sidebar where you can see your layout. So just imagine like a little sidebar and double page spreads all the way down, like the layout of the book, how it's going to look when you read it. And you could then pull that across and blow the whole book up. And I love it. Like I'll just start going like for Ghost Cage, first 5 pages, bloody eyeball scene, like surrealness. Next 2 pages, Karloff talking to Ghost Bud. Next 5 pages, let's introduce Doyle. Back to Sam being blown into the building. Next 5 pages. Like, so I'll outline it just looking at it visually. Then I'll start just drawing little doodles of, I don't know what panel it's going to be or where it's going to fit, but I'm just trying to match the energy or the emotion of that scene. And hopefully you get a drawing you really like, and you kind of then can center the whole scene around that, you know? So it might be the last panel, the middle panel, or the first, but you just start going, all right, well, I got to get into this scene. So what's a cool way to come into this panel I just drew that I know I want in this story? So it's kind of like, it's instinctual, but it's also informed. Like you have to know you have only so much space and you need to end it on a cliffhanger panel to get the page turn, or if it's the end of a scene, you know, a beat of dialogue that's going to maybe segue into the next scene, things like that. So,
Caleb, when you're just writing stuff, but when you're writing more of a full script as opposed to something here where it's a little more collaborative, how much are you thinking about the page turns and things like that when you're writing a plot for somebody?
When I first started writing, I would do thumbnails so that like I was sure I wouldn't break anything. But honestly, like the first several books I drew, I didn't give a shit, and I just kind of like went wild, and I was like, yeah, it makes sense, it's fine. And you know, you knew like if you know your first page wouldn't be a double page spread, like that's just not how it works. Everything else was a free-for-all. And I use Clip Studio too, so yeah, I could always see like the spines. Pages comes in 2s. The only pages that don't are the beginning and the end page. That's just binding. But I've also worked on like scrolling formats for apps like Tapas, where that's not such a big deal. It's just one screen, and then sometimes they even break it out to be like one panel, you know, like one tight shot, whatever. I don't know. I guess I just kind of know how to do it. And the same way every story has a beginning, middle, and an end, every page has a beginning, middle, and an end.
Sure.
At least spiritually, philosophically.
Sure.
So
but
like,
a scrolling format is a very different kind of read and a very different kind of construction than a 2 pages opposite each other.
It is, but at the same time, like, you know, you have to deliver a beat per screen because, you know, nobody can see beyond the screen.
Right.
You know, hypothetically, they can like if you download the file or whatever, you've got this giant thing and you can see more of it at once. But yeah, it's like music, you know, as long as you're playing on beat, you know, like the page turns are gonna be on beat, and you can maximize them for sure. You can minimize them for sure. But that's the challenge of like each new page should continue to surprise and delight in the way the story should.
Though when you use music as an example, or as a counter example, I suppose, beat is a really interesting thing, right? Because the beat of a page that reads like this is very different than a beat of a thing that reads like that. At least I think it is. When I read things in those different formats, I contemplate them differently. I engage with them differently. In fact, I generally find with endlessly scrolling things, I almost don't ever engage with anything outside of the moment. I'm always in the now when I do this. Whereas with a comics page, it's really common for me to read the page and then sometimes go back 6 pages and reread a sequence, and it informs what I'm reading there. If that makes any sense at all, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, with the thing that people, you know, let's not to go all McCloudian on everybody, but comics is an active medium, just like reading prose or whatever. Like you're like the god of time. You're Metron in your chair, like deciding what to absorb and when, and like that's like the beauty of comics, and like one of the things that makes it beautiful, at least for the artists who spent days drawing like a crowd scene or whatever, is hopefully somebody spends more than like a millisecond like looking at the detail and like appreciating the work. But yeah, I mean, I read a ton of comics on my phone, and if I'm busy and stuff, like it breaks my heart. I'm like, look at this beautiful page on my tiny ass phone, and I'm in a hurry, or I'm on the train, or like I really just want to know if these two kiss, or like if this guy dies, or like whatever it is. So I probably don't flip back as much as I would like in a print experience, or even just like reading it on a tablet or a desktop or something, like where you've got a lot more room and you can see a spread all at once. But yeah, like I don't know, you gotta choose like your time signature, and it's like if you want to make them dance, you hit the 4/4. If you want to make them waltz, you hit the 3/4. If if you want to blow their minds, you play in like 14/3 or some dumb metal shit and like break their brains a little bit. But yeah, pretty much when you make comics, you're trying to hit people with that like rhythm, and so when you're working on it, it makes sense to like try to convey information in that order. But it's something to master over time. But pretty much like my only goal when I'm showing people a comic in its initial stages is like, does this make sense, and does it seem like a comic? And if they can answer those questions without thinking too hard, like it's you're in the right time signature, so to speak.
Yeah. Nick, in terms of a page design, one of the things we pointed out earlier is that there's a real density to Ghost Cage, a lot denser than a sort of not a traditional comic, but that you normally get in a book.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of comics are really kind of 6-7 pages or panels at the most, and you've got like a lot of 8s, 12s.
Yeah.
How does that change the way you frame a page?
It doesn't really. It's the storytelling on the page. So I think Ghost Cage is just a little more moment to moment. Like you could probably take out those panels and it would still work fine. And then the smaller panels just become bigger. So like what Caleb just said, when we're talking about beats and whatnot, like I'm adding extra panels because there's a line of dialogue I wanted and I like. And I want that reader to pause on that particular character's face. Mm-hmm. So I think, like, say, majority of the superhero books you see are on average 4 to 5, 6 panels at most, I would say. And they'll fit 3 to 4 word balloons per panel. In word balloon 2, you might get the crux of the emotion. So I like, with Ghost Cage, I'm going to add an extra panel. So word balloon 2 gets its own panel, and we're looking at the character who is either saying it or it's directed at. So we really drive that point home. And that's where I think informed all those panels. Or the action, I was just like, I want a cool flow. I want to see Sam run, jump off the cliff, rather than, angry eye, he's jumping already. I'm going to show you him building up that momentum, flying through the air, punching. So it's just like maybe slowing down the timing. But then in terms of the dialogue scenes, I want to key in on certain characters and not design around word balloons, if you will. Give each word balloon its own point, or as we've been saying, beat. You see the picture and then you either see the picture and feel the beat, or you read the line and feel the beat. And that becomes an own art of itself. Should you see the picture first and then read the line, or read the line, then see the picture? So, I think I added panels just to hit emotion, if you will.
Yeah. No, there's a real alchemy between the words and the pictures that it's hard sometimes to balance.
Yeah, I mean, Brian, I think that's like, it's a great point. We didn't separate the writer and the artist here. The artist dictated the visual storytelling. And that just goes back to like a lot of the manga we're influenced by, which is mostly written and drawn by the same person. So, and they draw their thumbnails as they write, so I think to me, that's comics. It's a visual medium. I love storytelling that flows. Don't get me wrong, though. I still like Crisis, and I like to be the big team books and, lots of exposition, so it's all different ways to do comics. For our particular style, I really like a good flowing visual. So,
no, very much so. Let me pause for a second here and just go, if anybody who's watching at home has any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. We will try to get to them. But we're having a good conversation, so we might also ignore you. But I just want to remind people that that's an option. So Nick, you work digitally, or
yeah. I started on paper on this, and then I was like, "There's no way I will get this done if I do it on paper," because I wanted to tone it too. And nothing does tones better than the computer. It's so much faster. But the problem is you get too many options. So it could have been, like a black and white grayscale book, which is not what I wanted. I wanted it to feel more stark black and white. So I really minimalize how much tones I can use, and not too many grads, not to gray the page out, basically. But yeah, I drew majority of it digital.
Other than the gradations and tones, what's the biggest difference to you between working on a physical page versus a digital page?
I'm a big proponent of digital. I mean, it sucks though, because obviously I want original art sales, and I don't have that.
Right.
I'm going back to paper, because like my art's really in demand and I'm losing out. That'd be nice to have that money. So now I'm trying to kind of get jobs where I can get ahead enough to do it on paper, but all the planning is done on the computer. It's the best possible way, if you're starting out, to have no fear, to just throw it down, to throw the lasso tool around a face and blow it up, or fix it, import a photo. I don't care how you got to get your comics done. Just, trace things, whatever you need to tell your story and make it look interesting. And the computer and digital especially, it just really freed me up. It totally freed me up. So I'm a big proponent of it. I love how I can edit. Like you were saying, I can just cut and paste panels, move them around, blow faces up, snap tools to rulers, perspective, things like that. There's no cheats, a lot of people in comics I see are doing a lot of photorealistic stuff. They are tracing photos. And like that's great, but at some point you do have to learn to draw, and only a sketchbook and life drawing is really going to get you there. And the computer's not going to give you that. So, but in terms of as a tool, there's nothing better than pre-planning a comic for me. And then now I'll take that pre-planned page, print it out, lightbox it, and go right to inks on top of it. So now I get my original, and I'm getting the best part of the computer, like thumbnailing it there. So
yeah, that seems like it's increasingly a common way for people to work is to do some of the stages digitally and then blow it up, lightbox it, and ink it.
I mean, back in the day, tracing paper was my layers. Like I always kind of worked like this instinctually. I would fix drawings and put tracing paper over, redraw it, and then put tracing paper over that to try and do it looser and easier, and now the computer, it just makes that all easier. So
yeah. What am I forgetting to ask you about the book itself? Is there anything secret or hidden that you'd like to share? I don't know.
I don't know. I feel like
this is the original cover, but Nick decided he wanted to draw it, so couldn't do it. But we tried. I tried.
I like that original cover.
I think the theme, like the existential theme of the book, is like, what the hell are we doing? Do we work ourselves to death for what? It kind of felt like, I think Caleb and I were kind of tapping into that a little bit. So, yeah, I don't know, Caleb. What are you thinking?
I joked it like when I was at San Diego and people were asking me about the book, especially like friends maybe who hadn't checked it out, like other comic pros and stuff. I'd be like, "This is a book about how much I hate having a job." It's like, and it just like, you know, I like my job. I like my current day job. Don't get on LinkedIn and tattle on me. I'll fucking find you. But and I got a lot of good clients who I do work for. But you know, at various stages, I've not liked my job. Maybe I've liked people I've worked with or things about it, but I did, especially like at certain points in the Bay, like, you know, working in tech and stuff. I felt the squeeze of San Francisco, and like it's all in there. Like, you know, Karloff is like the worst aspects of everyone's boss in San Francisco, you know, like the bad guy in the book. Um, there is one, it's not really an Easter egg, but there is like one little funny story about the plot of the book, which I don't know if I've talked to Nick about, because it's like I could never remember it. I was like, I got to tell him this anecdote. We're working on the book, and, you know, like people have compared the plot sort of to Mega Man. It's this little robot guy with like a guy with a crazy mustache is a bad guy, and like he's got to fight other things, and they're sort of elemental. And I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, like I love Mega Man, so it's all good. When we were like maybe a third into the book, everything was already decided, and the art was getting done. I found out that there's an original Mega Man game for like DOS it was supposed to be an adaptation, but they had to like sort of make it new. And the plot of that game is Mega Man goes into a power plant and fights all the different kinds of power plants in the form of other robots. And I saw that and I was like, oh shit, like there is nothing new under the sun. All the most beautiful art has been created. Obviously, it's a very different story, but there's some good YouTube videos about the DOS Mega Man game. I think the Video Game Historian did one. And so, yeah, like that though felt more like kismet, or like some sort of like magical synchronicity, or a blessing by the video game gods that I was, you know, like on the right track and doing something that was like fun. But yeah, like that's like my little Easter egg comparison, little thread of destiny in the creation of the book is like,
yeah, I mean, I think the book like stems from our certain anxieties. Like it stemmed out of, could we afford homes, you know, to energy and the climate. Like, so we talk about renewable sources of clean energy, and Carlos got the newest energy, but it's all for his own gain. And then he's got a coworker that believes in him, but then starts to learn like, wait, you're just sacrificing me. It's just like, it's all these, you know, I feel like all of us have asked these questions at some point in our lives, and it was fun to just kind of put that out on the page, but not overthink it and think we have any answers at all, you know, just put characters in certain positions and see how they get out of it.
But I do like the notion that you guys may not have been able to create exactly this comic if you hadn't been living here in the Bay Area. Do you know?
Yeah,
like
it was the impetus for sure.
Yeah.
That was, I mean, that was the original tower was, you know, when I come in off the Bay Bridge and you see these new pop-up high rises and you're like, that'd be cool to live in that. And then it's like, they're $1 million apartments and then the building's crooked. You know, you're just like, what are people spending money on? You know?
Yeah, I lived in a really nice building like in Oakland, and it's like, it get really hot because of, you know, it's hotter in the Bay than it maybe used to be, according to everyone I fucking talked to in the Bay. It's like, and I was there for like, we were there for the fires, you know, like I'd go, Dad is coming into work and like you couldn't even see through the smoke. Everybody's wearing N95 masks and shit. And I was just like, this city is like, I joked with Nick sometimes. I'm like, I got to stop worrying about the end of the world, because I think maybe it already ended, and like here we are still. Like it was always so funky. Like
that's the conundrum of it. It's literally it's one of the most beautiful places, I think, in the world. It's so unique, it's so great. And then it's just sad to see like how expensive it got to live there. And we were a young family that really wanted to raise kids there and stuff. And it's just kind of like couldn't afford it, So yeah,
I do believe in the people there. Like I believe in the people. I mean, what did I do to improve my quality of life from the Bay? I moved to LA, where I have all the same problems, even more so sometimes, so it's not like I got a solution for a million things that, billionaires did to the city.
Sure.
I love the spirit of the people of the Bay Area, because, there's, maybe your manager is on LinkedIn doing that rise and grind bullshit and like, just, like getting VC money at like, whatever. But baseline person living in that city is pretty tough, fairly empathetic, all things considered. And, like for as many people as they were cramming onto the BART all the time, I only saw one or two terrible things, like truly heinous things in 3 years, like fights only broke out like a handful of times. And so I was really proud to be I'm proud that I lived in Oakland and I worked in San Francisco, and I got to know so many great people who are still my friends. So yeah, I mean, like in a way, Ghost Cage is at least for me, complaining about like the Bay, which is a symbol of America, the American tech industry, and California, like, being this kind of giant state of natural disasters and despair and shallowness and greed, and, like the whole like gold rush. And it's sort of like, what is the West Coast to me? And like, as fucked up as it is, like I love the people here, and like I think about leaving all the time, but I'm like, I like it though. God damn it! Why do I like it here? What have I done? So yeah,
I mean, for me, for San Francisco, it's always been a town of dreamers. Going from the gold rush, through the hippie era, now the tech era. It's people dreaming and wanting something better and different. And the problem is that tech has locked us into a world where it's impossible for most people to actually live up to that dream now. My little secret is that I bought a house 30 years ago. And that's how I get to live in San Francisco, because I bought it 30 years ago. It's literally the reason that we have the Graphic Novel Club, is so that I can pay my staff enough so that I don't feel like a heartless monster. They might have some possibility to live. It's insane sometimes.
Well, I admire it. Yeah. I mean, I admire anybody who's still like a good person in that environment, because like I had some low points personally.
Yeah, but with all this said, though, salaries are hot. Like it's interesting. Like we moved back east, and it does pay out more. Like it is like you were saying. It's like the promised land. Like I don't think I've ever made more money than when I was in the Bay Area, or had really great jobs thrown at me and stuff. So it's just, if it doesn't keep up that momentum, that's when it can get difficult. And then, the housing pricing and rents just got out of control. And then you have all the speculators, people buying up houses just to flip them. And so it was during that period. And then, you think, oh, the pandemic, things might get cheaper. It just got worse. So
they did get cheaper for about 30 seconds, but nobody was working then, so
yeah.
Oh my god. All right, well, maybe let's talk a little bit, if you guys are up for it, about the economics of comics.
Okay.
And because you've both worked on corporate stuff, either at Marvel or, you know, working on licensed properties, and you've worked on your own material as well. Talk to me about the difference between those two things.
I mean, Image Comics changed my life, like brought me economically, like able to, I've told this story before, but I mean, I had my first child with my wife, Ingrid, and I was drawing Fantastic Four at Marvel and following arguably one of their biggest artists at the time, Steve Epting. And then I was working with Jonathan Hickman, and we went on and did a run of FF. And I think like that year I made $36,000 doing like 10 issues. And then I asked for a raise, and they were like, no, we can't, you know, just you're doing good, keep going. You know, they're very nice. I like the people at Marvel. I like my editors and stuff, but economically, like paying for your own healthcare, doing your own taxes, and then living in the Bay Area with a newborn, it just wasn't like I really was like, wow, I'm drawing my dream book, but I can't afford this. Like, it's just I was putting in too much hours for the return on the money. Yeah. And then thankfully Jonathan did Manhattan Projects with Pitar, and it was successful. And then we were talking as we just met on Fantastic Four, and he was like, what about doing an Image book? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And then I went and got that job doing concept art at an engineering kind of inventor studio called Other Lab, and was on salary, got healthcare, and I drew East to West like while I was double timing it at that job. And first issue of East to West did 48,000 copies. It went into 4 printings, and when it was all said and done, I think sold 72,000 copies on its first issue. And so, Brian, you know how it works. Back then, a $2.99 or $3.99 Image book was returning $1 a book. So me and Jonathan that month made $72,000 and split it. We were 50-50 partners on everything. We made $36,000 in a month. And I was just like, wait a second. I just made more in a month than I did at a whole year drawing 10 issues of Marvel. You know, like it was nuts. Yeah. And like that wasn't even like there's Image books that go way bigger, but like that was a very good. We had a great run. And East to West kind of held sales for quite a bit. Like, you know, it trickles down, but most Image books, or most books, not just Image, all books kind of get cut in half, especially now with all the variants. Yep. But like our book just trickled from like, you know, we did 48, 46 issues or something. It just went down like 900 to 1,000 each issue. So we like just, I think we dropped maybe to 35,000 on issue 2, but then it just slowly went down and just was, you know, and then you get into the trade money, and it's like the first time you see really large checks, and it was life-changing. Paid off my school loans, paid off all our debts. Healthcare was no problem. You know, like it was just like, holy shit, ownership. You have to own your stuff.
Yeah, well, because certainly, you know, even when there's the paperback of Fantastic Four, they're not paying you very well for that paperback, right? You know,
I mean, it's a minimal royalty, like 4% or something. You know, it's ownership is key, like to longevity in comics. And don't get me wrong, there are a handful of creators at Marvel and DC, but a handful and they are uber talents. I am not that guy. Like I'm more, I'm not that super talent. They're going to go throw on Batman, you know, or can like a John Romita Jr. that can churn it out every month. I mean, he's amazing skill. He deserves everything he gets because he's such a hard worker and has been doing it so long. And it's just like, I don't know. It's interesting. Like, I think like when we were talking about editors and a career and now the economics, like I think if you want a career in comics, it's kind of tap into what you want to do and where you fit. Like go with editors that get who you are. If you go that route, don't show your work to editors that aren't going to get what you do. Like, don't just blindly share your work with an editor that edits something that you would never want to draw, you know, like, and then ownership in owning East to West and doing it my way and not having an editor. We didn't have an editor on East to West. So I really got to kind of figure out who I am as an artist and find myself. And if you look at the early issues of East to West, they pale in comparison to what comes later. Like I really learned to draw on that book. So it was a great learning experience. And then the economics of it, like Image taught me the business. It teaches their accounting department is incredible. At the time it was run by Branwen Bigglestone, and you know, she set up this thing where you get your sheet of what everything. So, you know, you pay for everything at Image. They basically, you know, people say you owe Image money. I've never owed Image money. And I have had books that lost money. You know how to, there were some didn't sell well. And Image has never been like, you owe us money back for that. They support the work and they take the hit if it doesn't sell. Yeah. But what's great about Image is they give you the accrual, and you can track every dime and cent of where the book goes, what it costs to print, what it costs to ship, what it costs to store, what Diamond's fee is, what Image's fee is, and then what your profits are. And that is so educational, because then you really learn your worth as a creator. So now when Marvel and DC or anyone else comes knocking, I can go, hey, I want this page. I want this rate. And now I understand no one can afford to match Image's deal, especially when it's freelance. Sure. So now it's more of like, do I really love that character? Is that something I've always wanted to work on? Or does it seem like it's going to be a fun gig? But I mean, ownership is key. You know, you own your own store. I mean, Caleb's got Taste with Image through Ghost Cage. It's a fantastic company. Like I can't say enough good things about it. And the model that they created is really a lifeline for creators. Really is.
So, but as you noted, it is entirely possible to lose money on an Image book.
If it doesn't sell, or if you design it improperly, I think.
Right.
Ghost Cage would not have made as much money if we had a colorist. You know, that's a big portion. Like I didn't have
also
any.
Printing it in color would have radically increased the price. Yes.
Yes, and also paying out the colorist. Yeah. You know, the colorist, I like Frank Martin, is not cheap, and he's worth every penny. Absolutely. But when your sales are cut in half by issue 2, and then they start to really trickle down to, like, say, 10,000 copies, then you're kind of looking at rates for everyone where the artist might not be making as much as the colorist, because you've promised the colorist a certain rate. So you got to really plan accordingly. And that's why we did the book in 3 issues, but told you as much as a 6-issue arc. So we they're double sized, because I knew the economics of it. By issue 5 or 6 of Ghost Cage, it probably would not have been making money. And just mentally, that's like not a good place to be in when you're like, is anyone reading this? Yeah. You know, but it's like nice to end the book having sold 10,000 copies. Like, yeah. And yeah. So
it seems to me that one of the biggest fears is that you put all of your heart and joy into doing a miniseries, but you've basically got to do the whole thing before you know whether you've made any money off of it at all. Right?
Yeah, it's tough, but it's the chance you have to take, you know? And I feel like if you're competent in your work, I mean, I do think like Marvel DC is a great place to go and build up your audience and work on characters that everyone's familiar with and get seen. Yeah. And then when you feel comfortable, you owe it to yourself, especially if you're an established pro, yeah. I mean, I want to see what you would do. What would that particular artist make left to their own devices? So I want to see more comics like that. And Image isn't going to track you down for that money, but yes, it is tough. You're taking probably 3 months to make the book, and then you're not getting paid for another 2 months once it comes out. Fortunately, though, like that's why this is important, Brian, to like have these discussions, because I think you can now. You know, we didn't do a lot of variants, but at the time it was trend. I don't know if it still is, but like stores are doing their own variants, and then eBay shops are popping up where they want a variant and they'll put in minimal orders, right? So like you can make it work, but it is a lot of work. But I was kind of like, no, we just want one cover or two covers, because they're going to put in a crazy amount of orders. Yes, I'll draw an extra cover. So like you can do those things. And I think like you can come out high enough on a first issue that can carry you through. But yeah, you have to plan ahead. You probably have to work another job or have some other source of income to support you if you're doing your first book out of the gate from Image.
I think the fear with doing multiple covers is that while it will get you to a higher number, you will decline faster subsequent issues unless you keep doing that same number of multiple covers. So if you put 6 multiple covers on the first issue, you kind of are stuck with doing 6 covers for the whole rest of the book, you know?
And then that could backfire, right? Because then at some point you go, we don't want this anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think for number ones, it works, obviously. Stores are doing it. Stores want it. You know, but like after that, like let's get back to telling a story in comics, you know. So, but I guess there's a market for it, you know.
No, I mean there is a market for it. I just make it a point of pride in this store that one book gets one cover. That's the way it works here, you know. It just makes life a little easier. So Caleb, let me ask you sort of the same kind of question about your experience being a writer. And then working on licensed comics, because generally speaking, it is my understanding that licensed comics kind of get paid the worst of all the comics.
I mean, yeah, like I think depending on where you are, the rate can be fairly comparable to like a book that's maybe not a huge priority or a flagship title at the big two, at least for a writer. But I mean, there's certain publishers, certain licensed books where I've heard rates for writers as low as $25 a page,
right?
Or 20,
yeah,
or shit, lower or weirder or sketchy or whatever. I've been fortunate. The stuff I've worked on, I really knew what I was getting into. I knew what to expect, and I was totally cool because the time it took to work on this stuff fit in with my life and it fit in with my goals, and you know, it wasn't a surprise, you know, and it was, so I wasn't shocked. I didn't feel like the rug had been pulled up under me. But yeah, like licensed books, typically you don't get any royalties. You get a flat page rate as a writer anyway, and you know, like that's the deal. Like, here's the stuff, and then best case scenario, you got a cool publisher who continues to give you like steady work so you can do some of that audience building stuff. And you get like, some publishers are pretty generous with comps, so you can take those to shows if you're tabling in a lot of stuff, and you can sell those, and you know, those are essentially free. So like there's other ways to sort of like monetize what you're doing.
Do you think that there's a good value in working on a licensed book as an author in terms of building your career, or do you think that the license overshadows you as a creative person? If that makes sense as a question.
No, it does. It does. Okay. It totally depends on the book. Like, I think mostly for me, even now, it's about having professional work out. It's about working, like playing with the toys, because it's a unique challenge to work on like an established property that people really care about. Like,
100%, yeah.
Sonic the Hedgehog fans are hardcore. Like, they're as hardcore as any other like fandom, and so you do not fuck up Sonic. Like that's going to be a problem for you. Turtles is like a really good fandom. I would say of all the properties that I've worked on, Turtles and Power Rangers, maybe it's because they're like, the vibe is similar to like a lot of the stuff that's in my own work. Maybe it's because Turtles and Power Rangers constantly have new versions. So like the fandoms like get that like the evolution of it and the changes, like that's all just a part of like what you do with these characters.
Sure.
Sometimes you got a little bit like you have a different kind of like creative freedom with some of that stuff. And so like people dig it. And yeah, like especially like if you work with cool artists and you work with them on other projects, like they will follow you. Like most of the people who like my self-published stuff or my indie stuff, they like cared that I was doing Turtles books. Do I have a lot of fans from like the Sonic fandom? I probably have like 0 fans from the Sonic fandom. You know, like they probably like the books that I worked on. Like, you know, they say cool stuff about the books, but like they're not reading a Caleb Goellner special. They're reading Sonic because they love Sonic. And like, that's totally cool. If anybody's watching this who has bought Ghost Cage because you heard about me in Sonic, God bless you. I love you. But if you tell me about it now, it will be the first time I hear about it, which is all good. But yeah, like you probably like if you're thinking about becoming a comic book creator and you know you want to try to do that, the end goal financially probably isn't going to be licensed work, and that can even, like Nick was talking to, extend to the big two, because not to, you know, I don't want to introduce too many semantics and I don't want to try to sound controversial, but like Disney owns Spider-Man, Warner Brothers owns Batman. Like they're like, those are licensed books too, like to an extent. Like you might have some more leeway and stuff, but
well, and certainly we've heard from guys as big as Brubaker saying, I made jack shit off of Winter Soldier, you know. It's a weird situation to me.
It is, but like you don't own the work you do for like a big corporation either. You know, like not necessarily. You're lucky if you work, like if you're a car engineer and you come up with some patent. I mean, you make more money than a comic book creator. So, but like take that element out. But, you know, you'll be lucky if you work for like a company where you invent some new hydraulic spring for an SUV and they give you a cut of that patent, or they give you a bonus. Like the work agreements at most major companies is like, if you even use everything you use this laptop we've sent you to make is ours. And like, it's very draconian and shitty. So it's not necessarily unique to comic books, but it shines, it looms the largest because unfortunately, you know, the Superman creators got paid $140 on the back of a check and didn't get shit, and they had to sue for years. And you know, we all know what happened to Jack Kirby and even Stan Lee. Like they spent most of their careers like suing. So you know, some things have happened to like smooth that over a little bit, at least in the eyes of the public over the years, but it still goes on. So if you want to make comics and you want to tell your stories, you know, like you should be, if you want to do licensed work, if you want to do stuff for the big two, like that's an awesome goal, because that shit rules and you can do awesome work and you can get a fan base. But if you want to tell your stories, you just got to kind of be aware of like how that all works together and how it can all not work together and how it can all not work for you, to just avoid burnout and stay motivated, because, you know, that's really the most important thing, is avoiding the situations that will just burn you out and crush your soul and make you say, fuck comics. Like you don't want that to happen. You don't want that to happen from like a spiritual place. You don't want it to happen from a financial place. So, you know, just comics is hard. It's a ton of work. It's a ton of hours. Not always the best pay, depending on what you're working on. So you just kind of have to know that. And if you can, if, you know, you don't have other commitments and stuff, or even if you do, fit it into the framework of your life. Try not to so much wrap your life around that, because, you know, then you like, if you're not driving it, it's going to drive you, and it might drive you crazy. So,
Yeah.
you know,
well, ultimately, you know, I think what Nick said is that getting that ownership when you can is the best thing, because theoretically you guys are going to make money off this for the rest of your life, you know?
Yeah, and we own it, so it then
Yeah.
could have different lives. We could bring it back when we want. We could
Yeah.
revisit it. It's just creatively, aside from the money, it's so much more satisfying.
Yep.
But it also just goes back to taking advantage of certain opportunities. So, you know, just making comics. If you have a job, do it to the best of your ability, and then that will lead to other opportunities, I promise.
100%. All right, so let's start the wrap up here. I have two questions I always end these things with. The first one would be, is there anything you guys want to plug, particularly if there's anything else that you guys are going to be working on together? That's always the best of the plugs. And you know, and then as sort of a part of that, like, do you see revisiting this world at any point? Do you see being able to tell more or other kinds of stories here?
Yeah, I mean, I'll plug Ghost Cage, right? I mean, are they available to get? You have the only copy with a book plate.
We
Yeah.
have
special
copies
book
with
plate
a
for
book
it.
plate, yeah.
Signed
Yep.
by Caleb and myself. So yeah, that was a really cool thing you did, Brian. That's the only one we've done. It's the only place you can get them is at Comics Experience.
Nice.
And then in terms of, I would revisit Ghost Cage at some point. And we'll take the opportunity to pour out our anxieties wherever they are, you know, at that point in our lives. So.
Yeah, hopefully. I don't have the family yet, but my wife and I have been looking at houses in LA, and yeah, I'm crying blood every night. So maybe the next book will be called Cry Blood, and it'll be, but
well, that struggle never ends.
Yeah.
You know, in the modern world, unfortunately.
No, it's so that's why you got to dance as you march. You know, like you gotta put some flavor in it, and enjoy it. Enjoy the process, as they say in sports. Yeah, I mean, I'll work with Nick again anytime he wants. Like, I had a blast making this book. I do more Ghost Cage if the stars align. Anything to plug for me right now? I don't know. Just Google me and go to my website and buy all my shit, please. Buy Ghost Cage for all your family members for the holiday season. And then hopefully in a couple months, I'll have some stuff to announce I can talk about more that I'm working on now.
Yep.
I think Amazing Spider-Man 10, Brian, I did a fill-in on that. It's coming out soon. And then
I want to say it's the next
Action
issue.
Comics.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and then Action Comics 1050. I'm doing some pages on. So I'm just doing some little one and dones at Marvel and DC, and then kind of gearing up for whatever's next. There'll be some cool news in 2023.
Yeah. You have a plan for your next creator-owned book?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see it, buddy. Can't wait to see it, because you can fucking draw.
Dude, I appreciate all the support through the years. I mean, as early as Hal Tunes and then East to West and Ghost Cage, I really appreciate it, Brian.
Yeah. No, man. It's the only reason that I sell comic books is because you guys make comic books, and I want you to be successful, because if you're successful, then I can sell more comic books.
Cool.
It's like the circle of life. It's wonderful.
Dude.
All right, so then the last question, and the last question, much like the first, is always the same. This is a series. We are well into like the 200th or more show. I've lost count. We have done so many of these at this point. A lot of people watch it who want to make comics who don't. They don't know what they're doing. They're nervous. They're scared. So I'd love it. You already gave some earlier, but I'd love it if you can kind of just give your one piece of advice that you would give to someone who wants to make comics. It can be something practical. It can be something emotional. It can be something philosophical or spiritual. I would love to hear what you have, and I'm going to start with Caleb on this one.
Don't give up, because it's all hard. And my goal when I started like making comics in earnest a little around a decade ago, I was about 28 when I was like self-publishing this book, Task Force Rad Squad, with my buddy Buster Moody, who drew everything and did all the coloring, and he's awesome. But I tell this story a lot. We were tabling at Planet Comic Con in Kansas City. We had this brand new #1. It was 48 pages, looked like awesome. I was like, this is my ticket to the big time, right? Like one of my favorite artists and like a book I just really love. And we're tabling, and Eric from Image walks up with the PR person at the time to the table, and we give the man a copy. And I think like, shit, it's going to be smooth sailing from here on out. This book's going to be an Image book. I'm going to be like, like knocking Warren Ellis and Ed Brubaker out of the way. Like this is a long time ago. And like, no one gave a shit. I mean, like it took forever. Like we sold a lot of those books at shows, and we sold them on Gumroad, like digital copies and stuff for people who couldn't get a print one. Sold them mail order. It all costs money. Like I didn't do it smart. I didn't print 5,000 and like have a plan. I printed batches of like 100 at a time. I looked at my taxes over the past 10 years. I've done nothing but lose money doing 6 issues of that book. Like I couldn't make a Kickstarter work. Like I just totally just ate shit on that book, but super proud of that work. And all the opportunities I've gotten from working on that book and then drawing a bunch of my own. Now I'm doing that Image book 10 years later. I got to do it, and technically it was less than 10. It was like 9. So if you just like, you do have to believe in yourself, just like do that work and make the book. And you do have to really give a shit and like be, open to criticism and like really examine like whether or not you are making the stuff you think you're making and want to make. So you have to get good and get better and care and work really hard, but really just like not giving up. If you have like an achievable goal and it's in sight, and you've made a plan to like hit milestones and get better and be the creator that will get the book that comes out where you want, when you want, how you want. Ghost Cage was my goal. Like it's the symbol of everything I was trying to do from the time I was in my mid-20s and started drawing my own books, and I did it. And so like it was because I didn't give up. I watched so many friends, like life's hard and shit's a pain in the ass, and you got a day job and family and a million other commitments. I like put off doing some of that so I'd have time to goof around a little more and do things like comics. But when you don't give up and you're realistic and you're working hard, you will probably like be surprised what you can achieve. And just, don't throw yourself too big of a party when you achieve that, because then you're a new person. You're a totally different person than the one that started out on this quest, unless you magically do it overnight. So yeah, just do not fucking give up. Get better, but don't give up.
I love it. All right, Nick, bring us home, man.
I'll go more practical. So take an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, fold it in half again, and fold it in half again, so it looks like this. And you should have an 8-panel page. Pick your favorite movie and tell that story on paper. Do whatever you got to do. Use stick figures, hit the biggest beats in the story, and voila, you've created a comic. You're a comic creator. And that it's as simple as that. And then like what Caleb just said, then, you can take it to a show. I always tell like people out of school or people that have done comics, go to comic shows, get a table in Artist Alley, put your wares out, go start to network. The business is small. You can be a part of it. You just got to dive in, and you'll find your place. and compare yourself to what's on the shelves. Be more interesting than everyone else, and you will get noticed eventually. So, practice your craft. That's it.
Love it. That is inspirational, my friends. I love it. Cool. Well, thank you guys for taking the time and talking to us today and talking to us about making comics. It's I say the joys and terrors of making comics, and I feel that all the time, that the highs are highs and the low are lows, but at the end of the day, you end up with fucking wicked good books at the end, right? And it makes it all worth it.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. All right, I got to do a little housekeeping here. Stick around for just a second. I just want to tell everybody the next 2 shows coming up. So the next adult club, this is the adult club, the Ghost Cage. But the next adult club next month, the book actually it hasn't been released yet, so we don't have a copy, so I can't hold up a copy of the book like I normally would. But we're doing Impossible Jones. Here's the book plate. We have the book plate before we have the book. How funny is that? Carl Kiesel and David Hahn, they're going to be here next month, and we're going to talk about the joys and terrors of making comics. So look for that. It's a great, fun piece of superhero fun. It's just fun. It's a fun book. I love fun. The Kids Club book this month is going to be Everyday Hero Machine Boy. I'm going to butcher their names, and I apologize because I haven't met them yet, so to know how they pronounce them. But Irma Knivila, or maybe, and Treve Wong, and they'll be the Kids Club this month. But this is a great piece of work for kids, so everyone's really going to love that too. Those are the next 2 shows coming up. I want to thank Jordan for being my producer, running things behind the scenes all the way in the back. I want to thank Ben for running the show, doing the editing, doing the cutting. I want to thank my staff, Zoe, Kat, Kelly, Max, and Ava, for all running the store so that I get to have fun and talk to people about making comics. I want to thank all of you members and everybody who's thinking about being a member of the Graphic Novel Club, because really it keeps the store alive and it lets us have these conversations. If you haven't become a member, please do. And I especially want to thank our guests. I want to thank Nick and Caleb, because again, without you guys making comics, I would not have anything to do, and I couldn't do it without you, literally. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for making comics, and especially making such great comics as Ghost Cage. If you are sitting at home and you're like, I don't know what to read, I don't know, Ghost Cage, fucking great book. You can buy it from us too, and as they pointed out, it has a signed book plate. So but just go and get a copy. Even go to the library. You don't have to buy one. Go to the library and get a copy and just read it, because you're going to be really happy. So that's what I have to say. Nick and Caleb, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.
This has been great.
Very
Thank you
good.
so much.
All right. We'll see everybody next month.